I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a letter dated last Friday, October 30th, from the Federal Highway Administration. This letter states that the configuration I am proposing today is compliant with the federal bridge formula.
The gentleman's request will be considered under general leave. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are facing a capacity crunch in the United States today. Overall freight tonnage is projected to increase by 25% over the next decade. Our federal truck weight policy is 2 decades old, and it must be updated if we're going to stay competitive with our trading partners, especially those in this hemisphere. My bipartisan amendment would give states the option of increasing truck weight limits on the interstate highways from 80,000 pounds to 91,000 pounds if those trucks add a 6th axle. And I want to remind everyone, it is an option, not a mandate, and it does not govern weight limits on state and local roads. 25 of the 50 states, including my home state of Wisconsin, already allow heavier trucks on their state or local roads. So here we have an opportunity to move those trucks over to the interstate system, the safest place for trucks to travel. Under current laws in many states, heavier trucks are forced to share smaller roads with moms and dads driving to work or taking their kids to school rather than on the interstate where they belong. The U.S. Department of Transportation found numerous safety and efficiency benefits for this configuration in the technical report of its truck size and weight study. 4 main findings of the DOT report are: first, a 91,000-pound 6-axle truck would actually stop faster than trucks currently allowed on the highways. Second, this configuration would reduce life cycle pavement costs by up to 4% relative to trucks currently on the road. Third, this configuration would reduce truck vehicle miles traveled and would lead to reduced fuel costs and carbon dioxide emissions. And finally, this configuration would result in no additional one-time rehabilitation costs for bridges on the interstate highway system. I repeat, no additional one-time rehab costs for the interstate system bridges. Madam Chair, I urge members to vote yes on my amendment to support transportation safety and efficiency, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Time. For what purpose is the gentleman from Massachusetts?
Claim the time in opposition, Madam.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, that's all well and good, but that presumes that moms, dads, and kids don't use the interstate highway system to go to school. Well, in my district, they do, and in most, especially urban districts, they do. And when it comes to these humongously long trucks, let's talk what we're talking about. We're talking a 14% increase in weight and a truck that's up to 100 feet long. Now, if you want your moms and dads and kids to be driving next to them, that's your prerogative in your state. I don't want them in my state, and that's up to us. And as a member of Congress, I don't want them on interstate highway systems. And by the way, if we're going to talk about the DOT study, let's be sure we understand the conclusion of that study, which basically says, and I quote, "At this time, the department believes the current data limitations are so profound that the results cannot accurately be extrapolated to predict national impacts. As such, the department believes that no changes in the relevant truck sizes and weights, laws, and regulations should be considered." That's their conclusion after the study that they did that was just cited. And I'll end on this particular note. We have to understand who else is with us who opposes this at this time. The National Troopers Association, the National Sheriff's Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Association of Police Organizations, the AAA organization, the United States Conference of Mayors, the Advocates for Auto Safety, and the Teamsters Union. I think those all speak for themselves, who's on the side of safety and who's not on the side of safety. Madam Chair, I hope that this amendment is not adopted, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the gentleman from Massachusetts' comments, although my bill doesn't address truck size whatsoever. My bill doesn't include any change in configuration to the truck's size. It does take existing truck sizes and require the additional axle to that. And I also find it a tad bit striking that someone from Massachusetts would be challenging a 91,000-pound truck weight when their own state allows 99,000 pounds on state roads and county roads in certain types of trucks. What I'm trying to do, rather than having those trucks driving on a two-lane highway is to get them on a separated highway where everyone's moving the same direction and moving them off of those smaller roads. And I also would like to talk about the policy recommendations. What the gentleman from Massachusetts just referred to was a cover letter on the study, but not the study itself. I am referring to the actual study. The scientists that actually did the study came to the conclusions that I mentioned before, not speaking of a political cover letter by the administration who opposes this. And if we want to talk about agencies or organizations that support my amendment, there are over 80 of those, and we could go on, but time does not allow. I would emphasize once again that my amendment is compliant with the federal bridge formula. I would also note that my amendment gives DOT the flexibility to prevent the operation of heavier trucks on certain roads if DOT determines that there's a safety risk. And it also allows the states to opt out. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Chair, I'd like to yield to Mr. Barletta from Mr. Pennsylvania for 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to strongly oppose the amendment. This is bad policy because our local communities cannot afford to spend billions in new damages to our local roads and bridges. As a former mayor, I stand with the mayors, cities, and counties in opposition. When heavy trucks get off the highway to fuel up their tanks or to make their deliveries, they end up on roads and bridges paid for by the counties, the cities, and the states. More than 25% of the nation's bridges are structurally deficient, and a majority of these are locally owned. In Pennsylvania alone, we have over 5,000 structurally deficient bridges. It doesn't matter how many axles are on that truck. Additionally, I worked in the construction industry building roads and bridges. A local street only has a few inches of asphalt, while the interstates have over a foot of concrete. Our local roads are not designed for the increased damage, and our local communities cannot afford billions in new maintenance costs. This is not just fiscally irresponsible, it is indefensible. It's wrong to force our mayors and county commissioners to subsidize this special perk, a perk that many truck drivers are afraid to take on. This weight increase is strongly opposed by truck drivers and companies. There are serious safety concerns, such as braking problems and increased crash rates. That's why I stand with the troopers, the sheriffs, and the first responders. Please vote no on this amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Chair, how much time is left?
The gentleman from Wisconsin has a minute and a half remaining.
I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Chair, how much time have we got left?
Has 2 minutes remaining.
1 minute. I'll yield a minute and a half to my friend from New York, Mr. Neff.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the Ribble amendment to allow heavier and bigger trucks on the nation's highways. Every time we move a transportation bill, proponents of bigger trucks on behalf of certain industries try to weaken the restrictions Congress has put in place to protect the safety of the traveling public and to reduce wear and tear on the highways. According to DOT, there's an $800 billion backlog of investment needs on highways and bridges, including $480 billion in critical repair work. The underlying bill does not provide any increase in funding. If this amendment passes, heavier trucks will further damage our roadways and add to the backlog burdening our transportation agencies. In Map 21, rather than consider an increase in truck weight, we required DOT to conduct a study. The DOT found there is insufficient data to support an increase in truck size or weight. But we do know that bigger trucks are damaging and dangerous. The DOT study found that 91,000-pound trucks would damage thousands of bridges and divert more than 2.5 million tons of freight from rail to truck, further congesting our roadways, further damaging our roadways, and further contaminating our air, since trucks are 3 times less energy efficient and more emissions polluting than rail. It's also well known that heavier trucks are unsafe. In 2013, there were over 134,000 accidents involving large trucks, resulting in 4,000 fatalities. The DOT study found that 91,000-pound trucks resulted in a 47% higher crash rate when compared to 80,000-pound trucks in state testing. That is why the public is overwhelmingly opposed to bigger trucks. That is why the National Association of Police Organizations, the National Sheriff's Association, and other law enforcement organizations oppose its proposed increase in truck weight. That is why we should oppose this increase in truck weight and this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to the gentleman from Pennsylvania earlier, Pennsylvania doesn't have to adopt this policy. It's totally optional for that state to do so. I find it interesting that the gentleman from New York is concerned about this, while the state of New York already allows these heavier trucks on their roads in their state, as does the state of Wisconsin. And the study supports the fact that this configuration would actually reduce life cycle pavement costs. That's in the study by the scientists, not the cover letter. And so we have this dichotomy where 25 states already are running these heavier trucks. All my bill would do is allow them to move toward the interstate system. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just 2 points. I think everything's been said, but I do want to add, I've just was informed that the independent owners and operators of trucking, which represents 90% of the owners of trucks in this country, oppose this bill. This bill will help only the largest truckers in the company. It will hurt the little guy. It'll hurt the drivers. Drivers of trucks. It will put my family and other families in danger for virtually no advancement in the economy. It's a bad proposal. I understand the desire. I know that some states have done it, and God forbid that they've done it. That's their prerogative. But they're the ones who are going to have to answer their increased deaths and damages on the highways now at that. And with that, I yield back the time that I no longer have.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Chair, I'll wrap this up. Thank you very much. I appreciate this debate. I will say this. I'm not interested in whether truckers make more money or the rails make more money. I'm interested in the poor family that has to pay higher prices for food, for clothing, for goods and services, for electricity because of this weight restriction. I also am concerned about the states that already are allowing these trucks, 25 of them, but we can't drive them on the interstate system, which makes no sense whatsoever. And I also want to remind everyone that any state can choose not to do this if they don't want to. This would just allow the ones that would like to be able to do that, and it's in full compliance with the study. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Wisconsin yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.